The wind howled across the Atlantic, whipping through the rigging of the British fleet as they cut through gray February seas. The year was 1797, and Europe burned in the fires of revolution. France sought to spread its radical new order across the continent, and Britain, standing proud and alone, relied on one thing to survive: the Royal Navy. On the morning of February 14th, Valentine's Day, 30 years before Trafalgar, one of the most audacious battles of the age was about to unfold off Cape St Vincent, Portugal, and at its heart stood a man whose daring would redefine naval warfare, Horatio Nelson. But before the cannons thundered, the fate of empires hung on fog, confusion, and sheer human will. Picture the scene. The British fleet under Admiral Sir John Jervis patrols the waters near Cape St Vincent, blocking the Spanish fleet from joining forces with the French. Spain, now allied with revolutionary France, threatens to break British dominance at sea. If their combined navies unite, the Channel would lie open and Britain itself could fall. Jervis commands 15 ships of the line, weary, undermanned, but disciplined to perfection. His orders are clear: prevent the Spanish fleet from escaping to Cadiz. But unseen through the mist, 27 massive Spanish warships move like ghosts, unaware that destiny waits just beyond the horizon. As dawn breaks the British lookout spots, vague shadows set. The signal runs down the line. Enemy in sight. Jervis orders the fleet to form a tight line ahead formation against overwhelming numbers. His plan is simple: maintain cohesion, break through the enemy line, and engage with discipline. The British fleet wheels as one, sails trimmed, guns run out, the decks alive with the clatter of preparation. Among those ships is the 74-gun HMS Captain, commanded by Commodore Horatio Nelson, a man whose name already carries whispers of brilliance and recklessness. Nelson knows the odds: 15 against 27. The Spanish have 3 colossal first-rates, each carrying more than 100 guns, yet Nelson's confidence borders on defiance. "Numbers do not frighten me," he once said, "for I am in command of English hearts." At 11 a.m., the fog lifts. The 2 fleets come into view, their white sails spreading like wings across the ocean. The Spaniards, under Admiral Don José de Córdoba, are scattered, their line broken by wind and confusion. It's a fleeting advantage won. Jervis will seize without hesitation. He signals, "Engage the enemy to leeward." The order reverberates through the fleet. One by one, the British ships turn toward the Spanish, cannon ports opening like steel jaws. The first shots echo across the sea, deep and thunderous. Smoke blankets the water. The Battle of Cape St Vincent has begun. Humsculloden fires first, her broadside roaring, followed by the Victory, Jervis's flagship. The recoil shakes the decks. Men cheer as Spanish masts splinter, but the numbers begin to tell. The Spanish van reforms, threatening to encircle Jervis's smaller force. The British line presses on grimly, hold in formation, but one ship breaks free. Nelson, aboard the HMS Captain, sees the danger unfolding. If the Spanish regroup, they will cut off Jervis's rear, surround him, and crush the British fleet. The fate of the day could hinge on a single decision. Nelson hesitates only for a heartbeat. Then, in one of the boldest moves in naval history, he disobeys orders. Turning hard to port, he breaks formation and sails directly toward the enemy's center. It's madness or genius. The captain surges forward alone, sails straining, closing in on 4 massive Spanish ships, including the San Nicolas and the San Jose, each bristling with over 100 guns. The crew braces for impact. "Steady, lads," Nelson calls, voice cutting through the wind. "We'll teach them how an Englishman fights." The captain opens fire. Broadsides crash, smoke engulfs the sea, and shot tears through Spanish hulls. Nelson's guns blaze point blank, his smaller ship hammering giants. For half an hour he endures the impossible, trading fire with ships 3 times his size. Wood splinters, sails burn, and yet he presses closer. The rest of Jervis's fleet sees his lone assault and follows, inspired by the audacity of it. Jervis himself, far from furious at Nelson, hissing subordination, recognizes brilliance when he sees it. He signals his support, committing his line to back Nelson's daring maneuver. The tide of battle shifts. The Spanish van, confused and battered, begins to falter. But Nelson's ship is nearly crippled. With masts shattered and rigging torn, the captain drifts alongside the San Nicolas. Smoke swirls between the decks. Nelson, unwilling to wait for the Spanish to surrender, orders a boarding party. Grappling hooks fly. Amid cannon smoke and falling debris, Nelson leads his men personally onto the enemy deck. Pistols crack, cutlasses clash, and shouts echo through the chaos. The Spaniards fight fiercely, but Nelson's men surge forward with ruthless determination. Within minutes, the San Nicolas falls, but Nelson isn't done. He sees another massive ship, the San Jose, entangled alongside. With daring that borders on myth, he leads his men straight from one captured ship to the next, boarding from the San Nicolas to the San Jose. Rich cheers erupt as the second Spanish ship strikes its colors. Two ships of the line taken by boarding in a single action unheard of. Nelson has just carved his legend into history. Around them, the battle rages. The British line cuts through the scattered Spanish formation, isolating one ship after another. Jervis's strategy steady. Relentless complements Nelson's wild courage perfectly. By late afternoon, the Spanish fleet is in disarray. 4 of their ships are captured, the rest retreating toward Cadiz. Against all odds, 15 British ships have defeated 27 Spanish. When the smoke clears, the sea is littered with splintered masts, drifting wrecks, and the cries of wounded men. The cost is terrible, but the victory is absolute. Nelson returns to his ship's quarterdeck, his uniform torn, his face blackened with smoke. He's exhausted, but alive. In that moment, even his critics must acknowledge his brilliance. Jervis greets him with a smile. A victory such as this, he says, must render you immortal. The phrase would prove prophetic. The Battle of Cape St Vincent cements Britain's naval supremacy and marks the rise of Nelson as the Empire's greatest naval hero. But it also foreshadows a pattern that will define his career: reckless boldness, balanced by genius, a willingness to gamble everything on instinct. That day at Cape St Vincent, Nelson didn't just win a battle. He changed the way naval warfare was fought. Until then, discipline and formation ruled the sea. After Nelson, audacity and initiative became virtues. His daring break from line wasn't luck, it was vision. He saw the battlefield in motion, reading the wind, the enemy's confusion, and the rhythm of battle like a conductor commanding a symphony of destruction. Even Jervis, a man of rigid order, recognized that sometimes victory demands a spark of chaos. As night-veiled lanterns flickered across the British fleet, the wounded were tended, the dead buried at sea, and captured Spanish officers brought aboard in solemn silence. Nelson walked the deck of the Captain, now scarred and battered beyond recognition, and gazed toward the dark horizon. For him, the victory was not triumph, but revelation. I was anxious for glory, he would later write, and I confess that my heart swelled with pride. But beneath that pride lay something deeper, since that destiny was guiding him toward even greater tests. The Admiralty in London erupted in celebration when word of the victory reached home. Newspapers hailed Jervis and Nelson as heroes who had saved the Mediterranean. The king himself promoted Jervis to Earl St. Vincent and Nelson to Rear Admiral. Yet for Nelson, the glory was only beginning. Cape St. Vincent became the first note in a rising crescendo that would echo through the Nile, Copenhagen, and finally, Trafalgar, each battle more daring, more desperate, until his story reached its immortal end. But on that February day in 1797, amid the roar of guns and the crash of waves, the legend of Nelson was born. Imagine the scene in 3D: the rolling decks, the smoke-filled air, the flash of cannon fire illuminating the faces of men fighting not just for victory, but survival. Picture Nelson leaping across to the enemy ship, saber raised, as musket balls whistle past, the creak of timber, the blast of powder, the chaos of men locked in close combat. rendered in the vivid motion of history brought to life. This was not a battle of numbers or machines. It was a contest of courage, leadership, and raw determination. The Battle of Cape St Vincent endures, not because of its scale, but because of its audacity. Handful of ships defying the odds through discipline and daring. It proved that one man's decision, one moment of defiance, could turn the tide of nations. The echoes of that day carried far beyond the Atlantic winds. Every admiral who came after studied Nelson's maneuvers, his instinct to break from the line, his trust in his crew's skill. He transformed naval warfare from rigid order to living art. And though time and technology have changed the seas, the spirit of Cape St Vincent remains a lesson in courage, vision, and the power of decisive action. As the camera pulls back, the ocean stretches endless and blue, the horizon glowing with the fading light of victory. Nelson stands at the rail, his gaze fixed on the west, where future battles and glory await. The music swells, and the voice of history whispers through the wind. Sometimes greatness is born not from obedience, but from the courage to disobey.